Hi friends, namaste. So today we're going to start to go over the koshas in yoga philosophy. So I wanted to make sure that we had an introductory clip to the koshas, the sheaths, the three bodies, all that kind of stuff. So far in yoga philosophy, we've gone over the 8 limbs of yoga. We've gone over the kleshas, the roots of our suffering. We've gone over the Vrittis, which is the fluctuations of the mind, and we've gone over Kriya Yoga, which is to help lessen the kleshas or the roots of our suffering. So now we are going to be going over the koshas, or the 5 sheaths or layers of being of the human experience. So the reason why we went over all of those other concepts in the philosophy class is because they all kind of build on each other. So last week we talked about Kriya Yoga in philosophy, and in Kriya Yoga, that had different things that we were talking about when we went over the 8 limbs of yoga. So the 8 limbs of yoga is a path of yoga. So that's why we kind of laid that out as a foundation. That's going to be our big overview. And then the things that we are diving into are going to be little areas that kind of like dive deeper into those 8 limbs or our section of those 8 limbs. So we're going to be going over the sheaths. So what do the 5 koshas mean, or what's an overview of the koshas? So when we talk about the koshas or the sheaths, we are describing the idea of our true self. So, or pure consciousness inside that's wrapped in several layers. So the koshas are going to be those layers. The true self is in the center, and then the layers are going to be the sheaths. And so the koshas are not separate. They all cover the same whole and overlap like layers of an onion or a rosebud in the center if you like to smell a little nicer than an onion. I like to say that maybe some days we're an onion, maybe other days we're a rose. And it's okay to be either or. So we have the physical body kosha. When we're looking at all 5 koshas, we have the physical body, which is the Annamaya Kosha. We have the energy body, which is the Pranamaya Kosha. We have the mental or emotional body, which is the Manomaya Kosha. We have the wisdom body, the Vijnanamaya Kosha. We have the bliss body, which is the Anandamaya Kosha. And then this is a way of saying that we are not just our bodies, but instead we are layered beings from the most physical to the most subtle sense. So a lot of the times whenever we're seeing the koshas, we see it in terms of circles. So we'll see circle, and it will start with the physical body, and then inside of that circle, we'll start with the next layer, which is the energy body. And then inside that circle, we'll have the mental and emotional body. Inside that one, the wisdom body, and then inside that one is the bliss body. Now, when we're thinking about just certain class questions or something like that, we can ask ourselves, where is it that we would find the asana practice in, or where is it that we would find, which body would we see, or which kosha would we see the asana practice, which is like our physical movement or our poses practice. And since these are layers, since they all kind of are a part of the same whole, we see that the asana practice likes to reside in the physical body and then start to move to the energy body. When we look at things like our pranayama practice, we see that this is residing in the energy body and then starts to move to the mind. When we are doing a meditation practice, we see the mental or the mind body move into the wisdom body, and then when we go into deep states of meditation or yoga nidra, then that's when we start to see that we are in the bliss body. So each practice is like a key that opens up deeper doors. Now, the way in which we can describe these koshas is by explaining the 3 different bodies. So the first one is going to be the gross body, and that is the Annamaya Kosha, the physical body. That's where we can start to see the gross body. The subtle body is where we'll start to see the energy body, the mental and emotional body, and the wisdom body all in one. So that's going to be the subtle body. And then we also have the causal body, and that is going to be the bliss body, where we see that. So when you're looking in terms of like the Vedanta, we are going to see that the 3 bodies and the 5 koshas are actually seen as 2 different maps describing the same territory. that koshas are like the layers of an onion, while the bodies are like 3 nested shells. So, but the way that we describe them now, or at least over here in the United States, is we kind of look at it more in terms of we have the koshas and then the bodies are kind of organizing or stemming off of the koshas. So let's start talking about the 3 bodies. So the gross body, where we have the Annamaya Kosha, the physical body. This is going to be things that we can see, what we can touch, what we can measure. When we look at our arm, we're looking at the physical body. When we are looking under the skin, we're looking at the physical body. It's that material body. Now, another way of terming this is the food body. So this body is the body that's made of food, bones, muscles, organs. And this body is temporary and perishable. It's our meat suit. Now, this is accessed through things like asana, nutrition, exercise, and physical rest. When we start to look at the subtle body, this is the energetic or psychological body. This is where the energy, the Pranamaya Kosha, the energy and breath body live. This is where the mind and emotion body live, where the intellect or discernment or the wisdom body are located. Now, this is the bridge between physical and spiritual, and it carries our past karmas, our past impressions, which is our samskaras, and our habits. So when we think of the subtle body, we're thinking about the karmas that we have taken, either from this life or other lives or anything like that. We're looking at samskaras, past impressions from this life, from other lives. We're looking at habits, things that we're doing now. And then this persists beyond physical death. So in the philosophy behind this, it's saying that, hey, whatever samskaras, whatever past impressions that you have in this life, you're carrying it on to your other lives, unless you start to work on releasing those samskaras. So we're looking at pranayama, meditation, mantra, and self-inquiry is how these ones are accessed. Now, when we go into the causal or bliss body, this is known as the seed body, the cause of the other 2, the true self beyond thought and form. This is pure potential, and this is also where deep ignorance, avidya, lives. So when we were going over the roots of our suffering, avidya, misperception, that is kind of where this deep ignorance can also lie. Now, this is a part of the bliss body, the Anandamaya Kosha, and it holds the blueprint of existence. It's linked to the self, which is where we'll start to go into the concept of Atman. This dissolves at samadhi, and ways in which you access this is by deep meditation, yoga nidra, states of dreamless sleep to give glimpses of this body or this kosha. Now, when we're looking at the next few classes, we're going to spend a lot of time here. We're going to spend a lot of time going over the physical body. So when we start to go over the physical body, we're going to be looking at things like muscles, bones, organs. We're going to start to look into like our respiratory system. We're going to look into the nervous system a little bit. We're going to start to look into the physical body. We're going to do that over the course of multiple different philosophy classes. And then we're also going to kind of take a look at food. This is when we're going to start to have an introductory to Ayurvedic philosophies and that kind of study, where we will start to learn about the doshas and what certain body types or what certain type of dosha that we have. I don't want to say body type, but we'll go into what exactly that means when we are there. And then so we'll be taking a quiz when we start to do that. And then depending on which dosha you have, that's where you can start to really like play with your foods. Maybe you introduce other foods. Maybe you take away some foods that might not be good for your particular dosha. You can start looking at practices, what ways in which your physical body might want to move, which ways might be a little bit more beneficial to you in terms of what that physical dosha is. And so then we start to look at lifestyle changes too in that. So that's going to be the physical body. Those are the things that we're going to start to go over in the physical body. When we start to look at the energy body, that's when we'll start to look at prana, we'll look at breath, we'll look at nadis. So nadis are going to be their passages, ways in which energy travels to different energy centers. So when we're thinking about energy centers, we're thinking of chakras, and that's kind of what we're also going to be talking about in the energy bodies is our chakras, but we're also going to be talking about the nadis and kind of how those interact with the chakras. And then we're going to spend a good amount of time going over the chakras too. And then once we start to go into that, we'll start to move into the mind sheath, where we'll look at our emotions, our thoughts, sensory processing, and kind of diving into different practices for all of that stuff. And then we'll start to move into the wisdom sheath or the wisdom kosha. And this is where we'll start to look at intuition. So we'll start to look at, what even is intuition? What does that look like for all of us? And then, like, what are ways in which we may have misinterpreted intuition? What are ways in which we thought, like, oh, I thought that this was intuition, but it turns out that this is actually intuition, kind of looking at that. We'll look at discernment, higher knowledge. We'll kind of focus in on all of those other practices like self-study, and we'll kind of see, where we are at and like our journaling process. If there's any patterns that we start to see coming up when we're journaling, we'll start to look at what our dreams might be showing us as well. And so we'll start to take a look at that. And then we'll start to move into the bliss sheath, where we'll start to talk about what Atman is. And we'll talk about, universal consciousness and all that kind of stuff. And we'll talk about deep bliss and maybe go over some stuff about samadhi again, kind of revisit what samadhi is, even though we discussed it a little bit in the 8 limbs. So I look forward to kind of moving along in the kosha class. And yeah, it'll be fun. I hope to see you there, and we'll dive into it. Namaste.